Teaching was all I ever wanted to do, so why did I walk away? Let's talk about it. In 2022, I started my first year of teaching and I was so excited, but I quickly began to realize that I needed to step away from teaching, which is not something that you want to say or think about after you had studied 4 years for what you thought was your dream job. The first thing that people usually assume is, oh, you quit because the pay is bad. And while that might be true in some places, but where I was working in Australia, we were actually getting paid pretty decently. So just to make things clear, I did not quit because of the money. And I just want to say this is not a teaching is awful video, and I do not want to discourage anyone from becoming a teacher. Teaching will always be one of my greatest passions. I'm just here to share how it left me completely drained and why I made the decision to leave after just 2 years. So I didn't stumble into teaching. It wasn't a backup plan. It is a true passion of mine, and I definitely did not quit on a whim or because it was too hard. And honestly, it was one of the hardest decisions that I have ever made. I chose teaching because, like so many of you, I genuinely love working with kids. I love creating a safe and supportive environment where they can grow and learn. April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Especially for those kids that don't have that at home. But unfortunately, that's when the emotional side started to take a toll. It becomes a lot, and honestly, at times almost too much, because all you do is think about those kids and what they must be going through. I taught kids that had seen and heard more than I ever have, and they were only 7 and 8 years old. I still remember one boy from my first year. He had been taken out of his parents' custody to live with his auntie, and his dad didn't allow homework in the house, and if they ever brought it home, he would rip it up in front of them. But once he moved in with his auntie, who actually really cared about him, he improved so much. He went from a D to a C in just one term. But about halfway through the year, his dad got custody back and he moved away. And it shattered my heart, and honestly, I still think about him and how he is doing today. And he wasn't the only one. So many of my kids were dealing with things that no kid should ever have to go through. And just remember, you don't clock out at 3 o'clock and just forget about it. You carry it home, and honestly, it stays with you long after the day is over. I loved working with the kids that I had, and I was actually really lucky. The kids that I had in my class were so beautiful. I loved those moments when you saw something click, or they would just say something hilarious or so sweet that would just make your entire day. But unfortunately, it wasn't always like that. I had pencils thrown at me, I got sworn at, and some of the behavior that I saw, you wouldn't dare do that when I was a kid. And whenever I would talk to an older teacher, they would always tell me that it wasn't always like this. And yes, of course, there was usually a reason behind the behavior, but you don't become a teacher and go to school to have to deal with things like that every day. And then there was the hours. I was getting to school at about 7:30 a.m. and I wasn't leaving until about 5 p.m., sometimes even later. And then I would go home, and most nights I would work another 2 to 3 hours. And keeping in mind, school hours was from about 8:40 until 3 p.m. So it just felt like I never clocked off, and I just constantly felt like there was something that I had to be doing, and I felt guilty that I wasn't doing schoolwork. It was just a constant cycle of being exhausted, showing up, pushing through, and just trying to survive the week. I just remember thinking, is this it? Is this what it's going to be like forever? And I don't want to sound like a whiny Gen Z, but I just realized that it wasn't something that I wanted to be doing at 22. I worked so hard to get there, and once I was there, I started to feel like I was stuck. I started to realize that just because I was good at something and I loved parts of it, didn't mean that I had to be doing it. And then enter Camp America. Everything changed when I went to camp. Being out of the classroom, traveling, and meeting people from all over the world, it made me realize just how much more there is to life. It made me realize that yes, teaching is one of my greatest passions, but so is traveling. And while I'm still young, I wanted to see the world and not just live for the weekend. After camp, I actually went back into teaching, and I was at a new school with a new age group, and honestly, I really loved it. And although this time around I had set better boundaries and I was in a better environment, I realized that deep down, I didn't want to settle back into routine yet. But that's the thing. Like I said before, while teaching is one of my greatest passions, so is traveling. So when my boyfriend asked me to move to Mexico with him, I felt like it was the perfect next step for me. Now I get to travel to Europe, to the UK, the US, and I get to go back to my summer camp. All things I never could be doing if I had stayed in teaching. So yes, quitting was terrifying. What if people had thought that I was throwing away a stable future? And while most people were supportive, I know that there were some people that thought I was a little bit crazy. But honestly, I'm so glad that that didn't stop me, because it turned out to be the best decision of my life. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine. I have met people from all over the world that I would never have crossed paths with if I had stayed in teaching in the same town. And I have done things that I would never have dreamt of doing in my life. And even with the uncertainty and all the life changes, I wouldn't change a thing, because now I get to say that I live in Mexico. And sure, maybe not everything will work out perfectly, but I get to tell my kids one day that I traveled the world and I lived in Mexico. How many people can say that? So if you're sitting there wondering if the 9 to 5 is for you, listen to that voice. You don't need a 10-year plan. You don't even need a 1-year plan. Take it step by step and do what makes you happy. Remember that you can always go back, but you'll never know what you're missing out on if you don't try. And just like I said at the start, teaching will always be one of my greatest loves. And I know that someday when the time is right, I will go back. But for now, I still get to work with kids and do what I love, but also see the world. And these memories that I'm making, they mean more to me than anything else. But yeah, that's the truth about why I quit teaching after 2 years. If you have any questions, please comment them down below and I'll make sure that I reply. But yeah, that's everything for today. I'll see you in my next video. Bye!